All right, good morning. Welcome into the Out of Bounds Show. The Ace Reese watch continues, so we'll bring on Steve Robertson, genespage.com, 247 Sports. You're listening to 105.9 The Zone, ESPN, third baseman All-American for Hail State baseball this past year. And everybody wants him. Mississippi State fans want him in maroon and white playing for Brian O'Connor at Duty Noble Field in 2026, and then for him to be a first-round pick in the Major League Baseball draft. The show is brought to you by the amazing food at Two Brothers in Starkville and Older Brother Bistro in Starkville. Stop by this summer, as you're roaming around the Golden Triangle or Starkville area. Steve Robertson, will Ace Reese be playing for Mississippi State in 2026?
Well, I think so, and I certainly hope so. But I can't say with authority that I know so. I think things are a little more positive today. And when you go back to the infancy of all this, when news like this kind of comes out of left field, people start thinking, oh my gosh, what do I not know? And that includes me. You start beginning to kind of talk to people and work through things. And I certainly can't rule out the possibility of him entering the portal. And even if he did, there's always a possibility that he could return. But, his last public comments is that he was going to run it back at Mississippi State. One of the things I think is important to understand, too, is that nobody else can speak directly with him because he's not a recruitable athlete. And you can't even speak to, like, his parents. And, of course, everybody has a representative and an agent. But I think it's difficult to try to influence somebody that you can't talk to, and that's part of the deal, right? I mean, and I think that's something Mississippi State will have an opportunity to speak with him face to face before a final decision is made, and I think that's a very good thing.
Okay, and tonight's the deadline. Midnight?
Midnight tomorrow.
Tomorrow night is the deadline. Okay.
Yeah, correct.
All right, and so you feel, it sounds like you're pretty confident that he'll be back in the maroon and white pinstripes for Brian O'Connor.
I am, but again, I qualify that with, we've been in these situations before where,
Sure.
You get surprised. But, my thing is there's just so much juice around the program right now. Ace Reese has the opportunity to be the face of this program next year, and in many respects, the face of the Southeastern Conference and one of the most recognizable names and faces in all of college baseball. And I had a Major League Baseball scout that made a great comment to me, and he goes, you know what, if I was talking to Ace Reese or his family or his agent, I would say, you know what, Ace Reese was just another guy at Houston, and he became a superstar at Mississippi State. Going into your draft year, why would you mess with anything that worked? The new hitting backgrounds, the new hitting coach, perhaps a different offensive philosophy. He said, that there's nothing to really gain by making this move from a Major League Baseball draft stock standpoint. He said, if Ace Reese just comes back this year and does something comparable to what he did last year, this guy's going in the top 15 picks in the draft.
Yeah. All right. What else is going to happen in the next week or so with Brian O'Connor's roster, Steve?
Well, I think you got a couple more things that'll probably happen. You're down to basically kind of the end of this thing. Of course, you'd have to pivot, if Reese decides to enter the portal, and go address another need. But, I think there's a couple other guys probably by the end of the week. A lot of people are kind of waiting on bated breath right now, thinking something could happen today or tomorrow. I think it may happen a little bit later. I think you probably take another arm, and you got to get at least one, possibly two more position players, and we'll see how things go. But I think it'll be a good week for State, and I think if you're Mississippi State with so many of these players, like your high school and junior college signees are reporting on Sunday to be here for the second session of summer school and to be here for off-season conditioning drills. I think you want to get the hay in the barn sooner rather than later, ahead of the draft, because of the fact that you may have to make some adjustments to what you do depth-wise post-draft. And there's a couple of guys that got committed from the portal that certainly could be drafted and signed. And there's some returners, guys like, Garrett Fry, guys like Noah Sullivan. Those guys could ultimately be drafted and then have a decision to make. And so I think if you're Brian O'Connor, you want to clear as much indecision from your plate that you can as soon as you can.
Okay. Steve Robertson, genespage.com, 247 Sports. On the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. All right, so you're looking at a couple more transactions here, and then everybody, MSU, Tennessee, LSU, everybody's got to fight the draft, right? For both the guys that you've signed from high school, and then a lot of your portal guys that are draft eligible too. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, and listen, there are some guys out there that have already kind of told their advisor, I'm going to go to school,
Yeah.
And so, and a lot of that's not public yet, but, there are some guys too that, and it's so interesting how these agents work. There are agents out there that don't want to see guys that aren't going to go sign a pro contract get drafted, right? Because that means that's one less guy, one potential less spot that another one of their clients may have, right? So let's say for an example, let's say Garrett Fry, and I do think Garrett will sign if he's drafted at a decent enough spot. But I think it's a scenario with him. Like, let's just say Garrett Fry says, you know what, I want to go back to Mississippi State. I think we can have a special year, and we'll see how things go. And, of course, with NIL, a lot of these guys towards the backside of the draft, they signed for $150,000 because that's the minimum, right? And so he has leverage. But if he decides, you know what, hey, I'm going to go to school and advise his agent of that, we wouldn't be privy to that conversation, right? Unless he just decided to go on social media and says he's pulling his name out of the draft. And there have been some players for this draft class that are connected to Mississippi State that have already done that.
Well, let's stay with Fry. Handicap it for me? Give me some numbers on Fry going MLB or coming back.
I think he's probably coming back. And I think some of it is because, like, in North Alabama, he was a really good third baseman. When it comes to Mississippi State, and obviously Ace Reese wins that job. So he had to kind of recreate himself a little bit and go play a corner infield spot. Now, the plus side of him is there's not a lot of swing and miss in his game, and he's got power from both sides of the plate. I don't know that he's really got a lot of positional flex. But I think there are enough teams out there that could be interested in him that he may have a decision to make. And that's the thing you begin to think about, with this rev share and things like that. Schools now have a way to kind of compete against this where they didn't have it really before. Like, because it's not like you're having to go get on the phone and call a donor and say, hey, can you give us some NIL money for this? You build that into your rev share, right? But that aspect of it, I think Garrett Fry is the guy probably I've heard the most about outside of Pico. Pico, obviously, talking to people in pro baseball, everybody projects him to be, a guy that'll go, maybe 4 to 6 round and get a nice chunk of change. But there's a lot of people that are intrigued by Fry. And so I think of the guys that maybe some people are just assuming that he would come back, he may be the most likely to leave. And then it'll be interesting to see what happens with Evan Sierra. Is Evan a guy that just, hey, I can come back and do something special? Because down the stretch last year, I think Evan Sierra may have been State's most consistent starter.
Yeah.
But he comes back, you lose the leverage. And that's the thing you got to think about. Is there's some guys that are going to be ready just to begin their professional career. And there are other guys that can be like, you know what? If I'm only going to get 150 this year, it means I'm probably going to get 150 next year. I'm going to come back and bet on myself and see if I can't better my opportunities. And so that's really kind of where you are now. And listen, State is going to lose some guys in the draft from the class, certainly, and from some of the returners. And that's, again, people always worry about the numbers. They always have a way of working out.
Right. Steve Robertson talking Brian O'Connor's baseball team as he's putting together this roster, both through the portal and the high school guys, the draft coming up. So it's never ending for these baseball. I think they may have the worst calendar of the 3 major sports. None of them are good, but, and I know it's kind of miserable for all these guys, but it's like baseball's is even worse because of the draft, Steve. How do you see it?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. And this is no disrespect intended to anybody, but you're exactly right. The recruiting calendar and all the things you have to deal with between NIL, dealing with agents, dealing with scouts, and things of that nature. And you don't declare for the baseball draft, right? You do for football, and you enter the draft pool for basketball, and then you can withdraw, but you don't have to do anything to get drafted in baseball. I mean, you just go out there and play your game, and all of a sudden your name gets called. And so it's just like we had, a couple of years ago, like, with Aaron Nixon. Like you think, okay, everything is great. Aaron Nixon will be back. He didn't get drafted. He'll be the closer. And then the Yankees come up with some big money as a free agent deal. So even when you think it's safe to go back into the water, all of a sudden somebody comes and takes a guy that you were expected to come back. And it's what's crazy too is like in the middle of all of this stuff, right? Brian O'Connor, those guys had to kind of push some prospect camps back a little bit because they had to prioritize the roster. In a normal year, you're dealing with all these prospect camps. You're dealing with the portal. You're dealing with recruiting. You're going to have all this kind of crazy stuff that's going on. And then just when you think you've got everything settled, the draft comes along and a guy that you thought was not going to be drafted ends up getting drafted. And now you got to go back in the portal or see if you can't find another signee to fill a hole. I mean,
right.
It's really never ending until you get through the signing day of Major League Baseball. Once that passes, once the MLB contract signing deadline passes, then and only then do you have an idea of what your rosters are going to look like. And then about 3 weeks later, you're on the practice field.
All right, give me your top 3 or 4 portal classes in the country, in your opinion.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people have talked a lot about South Carolina, and I actually talked to somebody specifically about them over the weekend. They've got some projectable pitchers that really don't have a ton of production, and they've got some DH quality type offensive players that maybe doesn't have a natural position. So I don't know that they're maybe doing as well as some people would suggest. I do like what Mississippi State's doing, but they're not quite done yet. I think Kevin Milewski is going to be a great player for Mississippi State. I like what Georgia's doing, and I think we talk about, the portal king, that sort of stuff. Some could suggest that Georgia and Will Coggin and Wes Johnson and those guys right now may be doing the best job in the portal on a year-to-year basis because they basically built a team last year with the portal and then became a top 8 national seed and probably in a position to do that too. And somebody shared with me an interesting fact too. If memory serves me correct, that 5 of the top 8 national seeds last year were like top 10 portal classes. So to suggest that kind of stuff doesn't matter is to be a little bit Pollyannish, I think.
Okay. The catcher position for Brian O'Connor, how do you feel about it?
Well, I like Milewski. There's some things defensively you got to clear up. And, of course, it's kind of like when you look at completion percentage for a quarterback, it doesn't always tell the full story, right? Because, you get drops, you get guys that run the wrong routes, a lot of variables to it, just like when it comes to catching. When holding runners, a lot of that is on the pitchers. You got to keep guys close, and you look at those numbers. That's got to improve for him. He's got to be better. I do think he is the heir apparent as a starter. I mean, he's a guy too. His exit velo is like 110 miles an hour. This is a guy that could hit 20 home runs. And then you've got some young guys that are coming in that are kind of the future. Interviewed Tanner Bellevue yesterday out of Petal, and you got Wortham coming in. Wortham is a guy that's really good. So the bottom side of your depth chart, I think, is good. Now you got Jackson Owen back too, and then this is a guy that's had really tough time kind of staying healthy. But maybe you go get a younger guy that's a gap filler, you know what I mean? Like a guy that's maybe got 2 years of eligibility left from a lower level to kind of balance the roster out a little bit because you lose every scholarship catcher not named Jackson Owen, and then you kind of move forward from there. But I expect that group to be good. Coach Kirby is a guy that is kind of well known for being a developer of catchers, and so I'm eager to see what Milewski can do here in the Southeastern Conference. And, there's a lot of practice time between now and February, Valentine's Day weekend. But I think the pieces are there for that group to be really good. And that was the thing last year. We talked about how balanced that depth chart was because you had one for every classification. Well, now it's a much younger group, but Malusi comes in and handles business this year, gets drafted. You've got some younger guys coming up a developmental pipeline that should be able to sustain you for a while.
Steve, we appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Always. Take care.
GenesPage.com, 247 Sports, Steve Robertson on Ace Reese.